The 9,865th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation concerning the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Rwanda to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Agenda Item 2. Members of the Council have before them document S/2025/108, the text of a draft resolution submitted by France. The Council is ready to proceed to vote on the draft resolution before it. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/108, please raise their hand. The result of the vote is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2773/2025. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make a statement after the vote. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Mr. President, France wishes to thank the members of the Security Council for their commitment during the negotiations on this resolution over the past week. This delivers a clear message. There is no military solution to the conflict in the east of the DRC. The offensive carried out by the M23 supported by Rwanda must be put to an end. The priority is to reach an effective, unconditional, and immediate ceasefire agreement. A restoration of dialogue is urgent, with support from mediation at the regional level. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC need to be respected. The Rwandan forces must, without Congolese territory, as has already been declared by the United Nations Secretary General, as well as the members of this Security Council. MONUSCO needs to be able to carry out its mandate for the benefit of the civilian population without being obstructed in its efforts nor freedom of movement. This resolution recalls the clear role of the Rwanda and Nairobi processes with a view to reaching a sustainable political solution hinging on the complete withdrawal of Rwandan forces and the dismantling of the FDLR. Mr. President, with nearly 1 million displaced persons and thousands of dead and horrific atrocities having been perpetrated, civilian populations are paying a heavy price following the escalation of this conflict which has been protracted. We have been observing a conflict, and the risk is that this may spill over into a regional conflagration. There is a need for the Council to speak clearly to facilitate cessation of hostilities for de-escalation alongside regional initiatives which France supports. A number of regions in the country on Wednesday spoke out in favor of this call. To conclude, I welcome the fact that the Security Council has risen to its responsibility, and I wish to take this opportunity to thank you.
I thank France. I give the floor to Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Algeria has voted in favor of the draft resolution on the situation in the eastern DRC. We thank the pen holders for their efforts and thank the council members for the consensus achieved. My delegation participated in the consensus while delivering observations on certain negotiations. Mr. President, Algeria expresses its deep concern for the situation in the eastern DRC. And we call for the end of the hostilities and de-escalation in the provinces of North-Kivu and South Kivu and restoring stability, in particular in Goma and Bukavu. We also reiterate our call on the conflicting parties to immediately reach a ceasefire and return to the negotiations table in the context of the negotiation processes adopted by the African Union in order to end the bloodshed and to prevent the escalation in the region. In this context, my delegation warmly welcomes the statement by the African Union's Peace and Security Council on the 14th of February 2025. The statement clearly emphasized that the political settlement is the only means to end the conflict in the DRC and in the Great Lakes region in the context of both Rwanda and Nairobi processes, which were recently merged as per the recommendations of the leaders of the East African Community and the SADC. This in order to coordinate the handling of this conflict and its drivers, and in consistency with the principle of African solutions for African problems. We commit to this principle as Africans who hold their continent dear. Mr. President, the delegation shares the concern of the UN and the international community with regards to the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the eastern DRC. While the death toll keeps rising, and that has reached 3,000 deaths from last month, and an unprecedented increase in IDPs who have reached 500,000 displaced persons. In addition, disease is spreading and corpses are decaying, and there is no minimum standard of health services. In this context, we call on the parties to facilitate humanitarian access to reach the affected population and to open the humanitarian corridors and airports to facilitate relief efforts by the United Nations and the international community, and to alleviate the impact of this crisis on the population in the area. Mr. President, Algeria calls on all parties to adopt the approach of dialogue and goodwill to address the issues without blame and accusations and a zero-sum game or a confrontation in order to reach a lasting settlement that is fair and comprehensive in a manner that preserves the sovereignty of the DRC, its territorial integrity, and in a manner that addresses the legitimate concerns of DRC's neighbors. We also call on all external actors outside the continent to end the negative interventions and to do away with increasing influence in the region, some of which are the legacy of a gone colonization era, and to support the mediation efforts of the AU and the other organizations taking part in the settlement process. In conclusion, Algeria reiterates its readiness to sincere effort that will serve the de-escalation in the Great Lakes region and that will restore the confidence and trust between the parties in order to build a better future for all the peoples of the region. The region, as all people and countries in Africa, aspire to peaceful coexistence and prosperity and to reap the benefits of their natural resources that they have been blessed with. They also aspire to cooperate against the looting attempts and plundering attempts by any actor, whoever they may be. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Sierra Leone thanks France for its efforts leading to the adoption of Resolution 2773. We have voted in favor of today's resolution on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in line with our firm commitments to African-led solutions, regional peace efforts, and the pursuit of dialogue as the only sustainable pathway to lasting stability in Eastern DRC. Our vote also took into consideration the United Nations Charter principles and the mandate of the UN Security Council, including in supporting regional arrangement in pursuit of peace and stability. The resolution underscores the urgent need for a cessation of hostilities, the withdrawal of all uninvited foreign forces, and renewed engagement in diplomatic dialogue through the merged Rwanda and Nairobi processes. It affirms our shared belief that there is no military solution to the conflict and that the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the unity of DRC must be upheld. Sierra Leone welcomes the strong support for regional initiatives led by the African Union, the East African Community, the Economic Community of Central African States, the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, and the Southern African Development Community. These efforts reflect the principle that African challenges require African leadership and solutions with the support of the international community. We strongly condemn the ongoing hostilities and remain deeply concerned by the humanitarian crisis, forced displacement, and the suffering of civilians, including reports of human rights abuses, sexual and gender-based violence. We reaffirm our full support for MONUSCO and SAMI DRC in fulfilling their mandates to protect civilians and restore peace. The illegal exploitation of natural resources remain a key driver of instability in the region. We call for greater accountability, transparency, and adherence to international frameworks to prevent the financing of armed groups through illicit mineral trade. Sierra Leone urges all parties, particularly the governments of the DRC and Rwanda, to recommit to diplomatic dialogue and fully implement their agreed commitment. We emphasize the need for coordinated and harmonized mediation efforts under His Excellency President João Manuel Gonçalves Lorenzo of Angola, Chairperson of the African Union, and former President Uhuru Kenyatta, to advance a credible political solution to the crisis. Mr. President, for 11 years, Sierra Leone experienced a tragic civil war that accounted for more than 50,000 lives. As in the case of Congo, this council authorized a peacekeeping mission, including the first protection of civilian mandate. Our path to ending the decade-long cycle of violence was not easy. At some point, we realized that our conflict would not end through decisive military victories, and that dialogue and negotiation is the only viable path to lasting peace. We had to talk with each other in good faith and commit to signing a peace agreement with the necessary political will. Talking to adversaries is hard, perhaps a taboo for some, but we do not make peace with friends, but with adversaries. Like Sierra Leone, a similar roadmap is being offered as outlined in the harmonized plan under the Rwanda process. The plan provides a solid basis for Rwanda to disengage its forces and for the DRC to neutralize the FDLR. We urge Council members as well as the broader international community to meaningfully support this African-led initiative that will bring Rwanda and DRC to the negotiating table in good faith. In voting in favor of this resolution, Sierra Leone stands in solidarity with the people of the DRC and the broader region. We remain committed to supporting all efforts that advance peace, security, and sustainable development in line with the principles of the UN Charter and the aspirations of the African continent. Dialogue is a fundamental tool for conflict resolution, but its success depends on strong implementation and compliance mechanisms for agreed commitment, political will, and addressing root causes. As dialogue remains the key to long-term stability, Sierra Leone's peace process demonstrates that a well-structured peace agreement, backed by regional and international support, can transform a war-torn country, a lesson that can guide efforts to end the conflict in Eastern DRC. Sierra Leone will continue to engage constructively to ensure the full and effective implementation of this resolution. I thank you.
I thank Sierra Leone for the statement. I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the Russian Federation voted in favor of the draft resolution submitted by France to the Security Council in connection with the deterioration of the situation in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is an important resolution for all of us, first and foremost for the Congolese civilian population. This was adopted following a protracted compromise and many hours of protracted diplomatic work, both here in New York and during the summits of African leaders. This is a resolution in support of the Charter of the United Nations, the cornerstone for the modern-day system of international relations. This needs to be fulfilled by the parties without delay. The hostilities must be put to an end. Lives need to be saved. Ordinary people need to be able to return to their homes. In Rwanda and the DRC need to once again sit down at the negotiating table to reaffirm their mutual obligation, reach agreement on conditions for a sustained long-term resolution to all disagreement. This resolution also helps to build upon regional efforts and is geared first and foremost towards the parties reaching implementation in good faith and conscientiously implementation of measures which were agreed upon by the Africans at the highest level. Otherwise, the region will be faced with yet another brutal war with colossal human casualties. We need to draw lessons from the past and not repeat the errors of the past. Thank you.
I thank Russian Federation. I give the floor to the representative of the UK.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom is grateful for the efforts of France as penholder and the engagement of all Council members to enable the adoption today of this important resolution. The UK welcomes and fully supports this text. We hope it makes a positive contribution to the diplomatic leadership in the region, especially the recent EAC SADC summit, and helps bring an end to this conflict. UK ministers are engaging intensively to support a diplomatic end to the conflict because there is no military solution. President, the violations we have seen in recent weeks in Eastern DRC are wholly unacceptable. Today's resolution sends a clear message that these violations must stop and the parties must return to the African-led political processes. It makes clear that there needs to be a ceasefire and the withdrawal of M23 from Goma and Bukavu. We strongly urge M23 to immediately cease hostilities. No member states should impede this. It also makes clear that international humanitarian law must be respected, as must MONUSCO's mandate. And critically, it makes clear that DRC's sovereignty, territorial integrity, as well as the UN Charter, must be respected. The UK supports this resolution's call for all Rwandan Defence Forces to withdraw from Congolese territory. We urge the parties to fully abide by this resolution. Otherwise, this Council will need to consider further action. I thank you.
I thank the UK for the statement. I give the floor to Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Very much, President.
We'd like to thank the delegation of France for presenting the draft resolution and for their efforts to reach consensus on the negotiations on the document. As we are discussing the matter here, the security situation in the east of the DRC remains and it continues to deteriorate rapidly. Panama reiterates its unwavering commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC. With this resolution, we reiterate the collective call on the M23 and the Rwandan Defence Forces immediately to cease their advance and to completely withdraw from the area, fully respecting the ceasefire and the ongoing mediation process. Through our vote in favour of this resolution, we've also reaffirmed our support to the invaluable work of MINUSCO, whose commitment to peace and stability in the region cannot be called into question. We reiterate our support to the regional efforts to address this crisis, stressing that there can be no military solution here. We urge all parties to prioritize diplomacy and political commitment and to immediately resume negotiations and dialogue in the context of the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. Thank you.
I thank Panama and give the floor to Pakistan.
Mr. President, for several weeks now, the situation in the eastern DRC has been in a dangerous downward spiral with dire humanitarian consequences. This has set back seriously the efforts for peace and stability in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the progress made in that regard over the last many years with the support of the international community. The United Nations and this Council itself, including through the peacekeeping missions, have invested heavily for the success of this endeavor. We cannot afford a failure. We must not let everything unravel before our eyes. It was right for the Council to keep a close watch over the developments as manifested by a series of meetings in recent weeks. It was also logical for this Council to pronounce itself quickly and clearly to fulfill its responsibility to help restore peace and security in the eastern DRC. Pakistan believes that the resolution we have just adopted is an important and necessary step towards that objective. We appreciate France for facilitating the discussions and welcome the consensus achieved. The resolution reaffirms Security Council's strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the DRC and upholds the fundamental principles of the UN Charter. Most importantly, it welcomes and supports the regional efforts and processes and high-level engagements led by the African Union and other sub-regional organizations to bring peace to the DRC. We expect and call on all parties to cooperate and fully comply with the provisions of this resolution and their respective obligations in a genuine and timely manner, recognizing that there is no military solution. All parties, going forward, must prioritize dialogue and diplomacy and recommit to the peace and mediation processes in place. In conclusion, the Council must continue to accord the attention that this situation requires, and in that context, we must also review the role and mandate of MINUSCO to better correspond to the situation on ground. I thank you.
I thank Pakistan, and I give the floor to Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Guyana welcomes the adoption of the resolution on the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Council's firm response to the ongoing crisis in eastern DRC. We thank France, the penholder, for their efforts in bringing us to this point. Guyana voted for the resolution with the hope that today's decision by the Security Council will provide positive momentum to the regional efforts to achieve a ceasefire, prevent any further escalations, and ultimately find a sustainable political solution to this decades-long conflict. We reiterate our demand for the M23 to cease hostilities and for Rwanda to withdraw its forces from the territory of the DRC. Likewise, we reiterate our call for the DRC to sever all ties with and neutralize the FDLR. We call upon both countries to urgently implement their commitments under the Rwanda and Nairobi processes, abide by the decisions of the AU Peace and Security Council, and prioritize dialogue and the well-being of their citizens that would lead to peace and a final resolution to this conflict. Guyana further underscores the need for full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC and reiterates its commitment to working with all Council members to address the ongoing crisis and mitigate the risk of a regional conflict. I thank you.
I thank Guyana for the statement, and I give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea is pleased and encouraged that the Security Council was able to reach unity in decisively and unequivocally responding to the grave situation in Eastern DRC. We voted in favor of this resolution with a deep sense of urgency for an immediate ceasefire between all parties. My delegation commends the tireless efforts of France, the penholder, to bring the Council together over the past 2 weeks. The entire DRC is now at stake, and the situation literally stands on the brink of a full-scale regional war. There can be no military solution to this conflict. We urge the DRC and Rwanda to urgently return to meaningful diplomatic dialogue. The resolution we adopted today underscores and supports the efforts of the AU, EAC, and SADC in this regard. Africa's collective wisdom and concerted action are vital for restoring peace and stability in Eastern DRC. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Republic of Korea for the statement, and I give the floor to Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Somalia has voted in favor of this resolution today. In that regard, I would like to highlight the following points. My delegation shares the profound concern expressed by the Council members regarding the situation in the Eastern DRC. The deteriorating humanitarian and security conditions and its impact on the civilian population deeply trouble us all. We join the call for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire and cessation of hostilities and the immediate withdrawal of all foreign forces and armed groups operating in DRC. Experience has taught us that the silencing guns in Africa does not begin with finger-pointing or attributing blames. We believe that sustainable solutions must emerge through inclusive dialogue and regional cooperation rather than through measures that might inadvertently complicate existing peace initiatives. As an African member of the Council, we are entrusted with the vital responsibility of bridging the perspective between this Council and the African common positions on matters concerning our continent. We note with appreciation the significant efforts of the African leadership. In particular, we commend the tireless diplomatic efforts of Angola under the leadership of President Lorenzo in steering the Rwanda process and fostering dialogue between concerned parties. In this regard, the recent proposed convergence of the Nairobi and the Rwanda processes represent a significant step forward in regional cooperation. We believe this harmonization of efforts created a more robust framework for peace in DRC. We must emphasize the significance of addressing the underlying cause of the conflict. Internal reconciliation and dialogue among all Congolese stakeholders are essential prerequisites for lasting peace in DRC. However, for these initiatives to succeed, they require a concrete support and space to flourish. The leadership of EAC and SADC in their joint communiqué endorsed by the African Union Peace and Security, Head of States and Governments, has underscored the political dialogue and non-military approaches are the fundamental pillars for achieving lasting peace. The implementation of these commitments has already commenced. In particular, the chiefs of defense of the EAC member states have just concluded their deliberation on the security situation in eastern DRC, and their conclusion will inform the joint EAC and SADC meeting of the CDFs is scheduled to take place in Dar es Salaam on the 24th of this month. Therefore, we believe the Security Council should extend a stronger support to these efforts and ensure that international engagement aligns with and reinforces the existing African-led initiatives. To conclude, the path to sustainable peace in DRC must be paved with a commitment to genuine dialogue, both within DRC and among the regional stakeholders. My delegation stands in steadfast solidarity with all people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We remain unwavering in our respect for their sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the unity of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. I thank Somalia for the statement and give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we thank France for its dedicated stewardship of this resolution, which accurately reflects the realities of the conflict in eastern DRC and takes an initial step toward promoting accountability for M23 and Rwandan advances. This week, the United States imposed sanctions on James Kabarebe, Rwanda's Minister of State for Regional Integration, and Lawrence Kanyuka, Kingston, spokesperson for M23/AFC, as well as two of Kanyuka's companies. These actions underscore our intent to promote accountability for key officials who enable Rwanda's and M23's destabilizing activities and continued impunity for human rights abuses in eastern DRC. We applaud similar actions taken by other member states aimed at compelling Rwanda to return to the negotiating table and bring this violence to an end. We once again urge Council members to take urgent action on sanctions nominations in the 1533 Committee. The United States firmly supports African-led political processes aimed at resolving the conflict in eastern DRC. Regional actors have by far the most at stake when it comes to preventing an all-out war in the Great Lakes region. However, we must not let African-led processes preclude swift and strong responses by the Security Council. We must speak, and more importantly, act in a united manner if we are to advance solutions to this crisis. I thank you.
I thank the United States for their statement. Now I'd like to make a statement in my capacity as representative of China. Dear colleagues, since the start of the recent escalations in the eastern DRC, the weeks-long ongoing conflict has gripped the international community. After capturing Goma, the M23 of the international and regional calls for a ceasefire, and in breach of its own unilateral ceasefire commitment, went on to take Bukavu, and other places, causing further escalations in the eastern DRC and pushing up the risks of a wider regional conflict. The Security Council, in the just adopted resolution, demands that the M23 immediately cease hostilities and withdraw from the areas it's occupying. It's in line with the expectations of the international community in general and regional countries in particular vis-à-vis cessation of hostilities, and it is also an act of the Council to discharge its responsibility. China voted in favor of the draft resolution, and we welcome the unanimous adoption of the resolution by the Council. Dear colleagues, the current situation in the eastern DRC is still worsening. China expects all the parties concerned to heed the cause of the international community and the Security Council by immediately ceasing all hostilities and refraining from any further action that may exacerbate tensions and bringing them to a head. China reiterates firm support for solving African issues the African way, and that Security Council resolutions should be designed to support regional processes, to build synergy with the mediation efforts at the regional level. All parties concerned must respond in good faith to regional peace initiatives and be committed to resolving differences through diplomacy and dialogue. The DRC and Rwanda are neighbors, and as such, their differences and tensions, we believe, are not irreconcilable. What truly matters is for both sides to show readiness to return to the negotiating table without delay. The Great Lakes region is at a critical juncture, and to stand on the side of peace is our shared responsibility. China firmly supports the DRC defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity and remains committed to working tirelessly with the rest of the international community until fighting stops and the situation is eased. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. Now I give the floor to the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Merci,
Thank you, President. President, I won't read out the statement that I've prepared. Of course, as you know, the situation has accelerated somewhat and things have changed. But I would simply like to recall that the maintenance of international peace and security is a principle that underpins the bulk of the collective security system that was established by the founding fathers of the UN after the Second World War, such that any threat to peace, any breakdown of peace, or any act of aggression compels the Security Council to act without delay. The invasion by the RDF and their accomplices of the AFC and the M23 of Congolese provinces in the North and South Kivu, and the brutal seizure of Goma on the 27th of January led my government, who, through Her Excellency Ms. Therese Wagner, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, to address this Council on 3 occasions in the space of just 3 weeks. This shows the need for peace that the Democratic Republic of the Congo expects of this Security Council. What you have just done today is precisely what we were entitled to expect of the Council since the 26th of January. But 3 weeks had to elapse
Unanimité.
Council to speak unanimously about this subject. Now, this attitude was particularly dangerous because it prevented the Council from speaking out when the seriousness and the urgency of the situation obliged it to react swiftly and decisively. In this particular case, the Council's paralysis gave free rein to the illegal occupation of DRC territory by the Rwandan Defence Forces and their supporters in the AFC M23, in the knowledge that every further day of inaction compromises regional and international peace and security, only strengthens the aggressor, and undermines the United Nations' credibility. President, everybody knows the human cost. I won't remind you of it here. The horror that the people are living through in the eastern part of our country is well known to everybody. we have spoken about it more than 3 times here. But what I want to say today is that the Council took a lot of time to act, and to act unanimously. But now the Council has been able to move things forward. And therefore, on behalf of the government of the DRC, and on behalf of all of the boys and girls of the DRC, in particular those in Bunagana, in Kamanyola, including Goma, Sake, Minova, Nyabibwe, Kale, Kavumu, and Bukavu, on their behalf, I would like to thank all members of the Council, and especially the A3+1, for their precious contribution, without which this resolution would not have been unanimously adopted. To all of you, distinguished members of the Council, to the P5, and particularly to France, the penholder, to the United States as well, who initiated sanctions against the Rwandan authorities and the M23 authorities. To you all, we wish to express our heartfelt thanks. Our heartfelt wish is that this resolution be implemented immediately to give respite to the people of the DRC in the occupied areas. They are paying the highest price and bearing the brunt for this military adventure. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the DRC. I now give the floor to the representative of Rwanda.
Mr. President, thank you for giving me the floor. I congratulate you again on your presidency and leadership of this council. Mr. President, just 48 hours ago, we gathered in this council to discuss the importance of supporting regional initiatives and the mechanisms designed to foster peace in Eastern DRC and our region. Rwanda takes note of the resolution. I want to thank the council members who have reached out to Rwanda to hear our views and commend those who met and listened to us. We wish to highlight our deep concern regarding the unprecedented intimidation of African voices within this esteemed council, particularly targeting A3 members. We condemn this behavior in the strongest terms. This speaks volumes about the DRC and its belief that the solution to their inter-Congolese conflict will come from actors from outside the continent. Rwanda acknowledges, commends, and is fully committed to the efforts of the African Union, the East African Community, and the Southern African Development Corporation. Mr. President, since the meeting on Wednesday, Rwanda is pleased to inform the Council that today, 21st February, the EAC Chiefs of Defense met in Nairobi as a follow-up on the outcome of the joint EAC SADC Summit outcome. On Monday, the 24th February, the Joint Chiefs of Defense of both the EAC and SADC will meet to draw a joint roadmap in line with the recommendation of the joint summit that was held in Dar es Salaam on 8th February. In this regard, we call on this Council to support these regional efforts and avoid being dragged into the risk of undermining regional efforts. Mr. President, for Rwanda, we believe any Council product on this matter should answer one simple question: how did we end up here? The international community see the signs that could lead to this situation. Is the Council answering the big question of how we ended up here and how to find a solution that addresses the root causes of this conflict? Those are the fundamental questions that we should be working to so that we can work towards addressing this conflict in its roots so that we can have sustainable peace. We believe that any outcome that doesn't take Rwanda's security concerns seriously will not offer a sustainable solution to the conflict. The security challenges posed by FDLR and its splinter groups are of very serious concern for Rwanda. DRC must be held accountable for its continued preservation of FDLR, embedding it in its army, equipping the FDLR with sophisticated weapons, and using it as an ally and a fighting force. Any outcome that ignores the legitimate concerns, the legitimate grievances of the Kinyarwanda-speaking Congolese, which are the root cause of the existence of M23, will also not help resolve the conflict. Mr. President, we are concerned that there is a single focus on M23 and total silence on the humongous humanitarian violations committed across many parts of DRC, including the massacres, rapes, and violation of rights by Codeco, in Ituri, ADF, and numerous other armed groups in the areas mentioned, Ituri, Beni, and South Kivu. The chaos on the streets of Kinshasa and the burning of embassies and foreign missions was only condemned in passing. The Council cannot be selective in its condemnation. The DRC conflict is complex, multifaceted, and the Council must address it comprehensively, working with all partners and stakeholders involved. Mr. President, Rwanda remains fully committed to the regional initiatives under the Rwanda-Nairobi process and will continue to meet its part of the bargain, playing a constructive role for the sake of sustainable peace, security, and stability in our region. We call upon DRC to heed the regional call, immediately turn to the peace process, and commit to inclusive dialogue with state and non-state actors, armed or unarmed, including M23, as outlined in the ESC SADC outcome, which was endorsed by the AU Summit. I thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to thank the representative of Rwanda for their statement, and I give the floor to Angola.
For giving us the floor. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, while we are here meeting for the fourth time in the last few days, the security and humanitarian situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, continues to deteriorating as the M23 widens its territorial control, more people are killed and displaced, and the risk of regional conflict is growing. In the meantime, regional organizations like the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, the East African Community, EAC, separately and jointly, the Economic Community of Central Africa States, ECAS, as well as the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, have been unequivocally in calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in the Eastern DRC and the resumption of negotiations and dialogue of all concerned parties under the Rwanda and Nairobi process. There is no military solution to the DRC conflict, thus the diplomatic and political track has to be prioritized. We need to uphold and consolidate the deliverables of the Rwanda process under the mediation of His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of Angola, namely the ceasefire agreement, the adoption of an harmonized plan to neutralize the FDLR under the responsibility of the DRC, and the disengagement of forces, lifting of defensive security measure plan under the responsibility of Rwanda, and the strengthening of the ad hoc verification mechanism by intelligence experts from the three countries, Angola, DRC, and Rwanda. These developments have created a new momentum and relevance to the Nairobi process, tasked to address the matter relating to different armed groups operating within DRC, including the issue of M23. The strict observance of the ceasefire agreed upon between the parties and the immediate cessation of all hostilities are paramount to creating a political environment conducive to a peaceful solution under the Rwanda and Nairobi processes. Mr. President, we welcome the adoption of the draft resolution today, which represents a significant step in the right direction as it paves the way to achieve the collective outcome that all relevant actors and stakeholders in Africa and around the world have been calling for: the immediate cessation of hostilities, unconditional ceasefire, immediate and unconditional return to the negotiating table through the Rwanda and Nairobi process, support of sub-regional and regional efforts and initiatives in the spirit of African solutions to African problems. This Council has the responsibility to assist the people and the government of the DRC to achieve these aspirations by acting swiftly and decisively to prevent further escalation of this conflict and promote its peaceful resolution. Any further delays to approve this draft resolution to support an African approach to this long and destructive conflict would have jeopardized the credibility of this Council in its primary responsibility under the United Nations Charter for the maintenance of international peace and security. We need to save lives and stop the bloodshed of innocent civilians, including elderly, women and children, and open viable corridors for unimpeded humanitarian assistance. We call on the international community and the Security Council to continue supporting the ongoing regional initiatives to enhance coordination, harmonization, and complementarity between the Rwanda and the Nairobi processes to promote African-led solutions to African problems. We continue to value MONUSCO as an important partner in our collective endeavor for peace and stability in the Eastern DRC. In his position as the chairperson of the African Union, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, remains engaged in identifying the main problems affecting peace and security in Africa to contribute to conflict prevention, management, and resolution in Africa, with special emphasis and attention on what is unfolding in the Eastern DRC. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Angola. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.